Sylvia, tell me, what does it mean for you to be a European? Does it mean anything? Is there anything like European identity?
I think that in my experience, I have quite a long tradition in my family in feeling like a European because my parents have been already traveling across Europe, and they were exchanging their philosophy, life philosophy, but as well as knowledge between European citizens, and not only. Because we're talking about Europe and being European, and I wonder, is it something what we're considering just geographically, or is this something more? Because in meeting different people from different countries, from different continents, I have realized that their values very similar to European ones or European values present in another countries which are outside Europe. So is being a European just citizen of Europe geographically, or is being a European something more? Is it a term which includes much more than this?
How is it for you? Because your mother is Bulgarian, your father is Polish.
Yes, yes. I was, they met in Moscow, and I was born in Moscow. And then I have chosen to settle in another country than those three ones. So for me, today, being a European is feeling free, feeling as a free woman, where I'm able to vote, where I'm able to travel and to be an ambassador of European culture and traditions outside Europe. So I think it is connected to freedom.
So we were talking earlier that the idea of European identity is not new. What do you think about it?
Yes, I have studied the lives of quite famous people in different fields of art, of science, and I have realized that actually the idea of European citizen already existed between artists, between scientists many years ago. And the difference between 18th century, 19th century and today is that actually everybody can travel, and within Europe, and that's why we see that in the 19th century there have been people or groups of people which were living the idea of united Europe. So if we think about where does Europe go and what is the future of Europe, maybe we should search if we have groups of people or societies which are living ahead of our European times. And let's look how will they live today and how maybe will our Europe look in the future.
Do you have any ideas what kind of groups, which groups could be this avant-garde groups looking ahead, thinking ahead of us?
I have been thinking about this, but I'm still not sure which one of them. Maybe there should be several groups concerned, and maybe we should look about communities which live with European values outside Europe.
Okay, thank you very much. Daphne, do you believe there is such a thing as European identity? And if so, what would this mean for you?
I would have to argue that it is very positive that people are discussing the idea of a European identity, a more coherent identity in terms of the peoples and countries involved in the EU and the process. But to me, it is a different world. I'm from Turkey, and I'm not from a country that is a member of EU. I've never lived in EU, and to me, EU, I'm afraid, resonates with othering, not on a personal level, but on the level of the passport that I carry. Because whenever I travel, I've faced with certain difficulties. Last year I was in Rome, and the friend I met there asked me why I was there, and I said, all right, I'm here for an Erasmus exchange. And she said, you're not EU, how do you have Erasmus exchange? And I said, all right, that's the only thing we're allowed to have, the exchange. And I'm here for a week, so let's just spend our time together, and I'll be back to my Middle Eastern country. I arrived yesterday. I couldn't travel with the group from France to Germany because I didn't have my visa in time. I applied 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I ought to have received my visa 2 weeks ago, but there was something wrong with the American visa system. They closed it down, so the Greek consulate closed its visa program down, and I had to pull strings. I reached the secretary of the consul, but still I had to miss my flight, and I had to get this ticket to fly to Warsaw direct. So to me, EU is a certain amount of difficulty, but perfect for the members, I would say. Mm-hmm. Or I would again like to hear what the members are feeling and thinking, especially the new members, the way Poland is, mm-hmm. or the Czech Republic is. Mm-hmm. So.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
In general, it's a really difficult question to answer, so let me say, what does it mean for me to be European? I've been traveling quite a lot around Europe. I visited many countries, and I have my friends almost in every European country. And when I go to these places, to the other countries, and when I talk with these people, I can see that even though they have different color of skin, or they have different religion, or different approach to their lives, we all share some experience. We all share the same interest. We all share the same expectations toward our lives. We also share the same fears. When I talk with these people from the other countries, from the other European countries, like I feel that it's like talking with my Polish friends, you know, that we are kind of all the same. I don't see the difference. We watch the same films. We have very similar sense of humors. We laugh about the same things in the internet. We speak the same, you know, English, simple English, and I basically feel like home. Like it doesn't make a big difference for me to be somewhere else. And for me, for a 25-year-old girl, that's what that means to be a European. Just to go somewhere and feel like at home.
Ziza, what does it mean for you, European identity? Do you believe there is such thing?
So it's really interesting. I think that it's a subject complex, and I'm French, and I think that Europe, I believe that Europe represents human values. For example, I travel many times in Europe, and I met many people really different, and I study with many people who are English, or from England, or from Spain, for example. I think that I have many identity, not just one. I have my identity from my history, personal history, and from my family history, for my country also, because I believe that we don't have just one identity, because we met some people who are from, for example, I study in Japan, and I lived there during 1 year. So now I can say that I have also sometimes some Japanese, I'm like some Japanese sometimes, because when I'm talking, I'm thinking about that sometimes.
Mm-hmm. So what does it mean for you, European identity? Do you carry European identity, or what does it mean for you?
I think identity is a kind of construction, and I think it's in relation with the other, the self and the other, and the relationship of the two. I think as well that identity is changing according to the context. So today in Greece it's a quite difficult context that changes our perspective of European identity. So I guess that a dream of a European construction and a Europe of people is fading a bit away because of financial problems and austerity measures. So I think that it's quite difficult to respond to this question, because I feel that it would be nice to participate in a Europe for people, but this is not the case today.
Mm-hmm. So you're disappointed of what is happening now, the reaction towards Greek crisis?
I don't know.
Are you disappointed with Europe?
I cannot say so, because Europe, it's not only its politicians, so it's also relationship with people, between people. But in the political level, I feel that there is no solidarity towards Greece today.
Okay. What does it mean for you, European identity?
Well, from what I observed here in Europe, identity is more than just something that people, like a common mindset or common belief, like in a closed circle of people. Here in Europe, we have different ethnic minorities that is not disconstructed like they were in the melting pot of the United States, for example. They're coexisting, but they're preserving their own culture. So for me, the main, at least the main prospect of European identity is actually a kinder or gentler integration. For me, the European identity also poses a very, very strong challenge among the European people, because nobody ever done that before, and nobody ever actually succeeded in creating some sense of common identity among the Aboriginal settlements, Aboriginal culture, people who's been living in place for thousands of years as their forerunners, as their ancestors, been living there as French people, German people, Polish people. So it poses a great challenge, because in order to form a common identity, actually it requires an empathy, at least. Empathy, like in immigrant countries, they have the same empathy, like they're being stranger in strange land, so they form a new type of identity. But here, the people are locals in different lands, and most of them don't have the experience being a stranger in a strange land, not to say being the minorities in like a massive dominant culture like in Germany or in France. So it is, for me, the greatest challenge for the European people to have identity is actually the empathy, like between the minorities and the majorities. And I think we're actually working on that, because there's a Fulbright program, there are Erasmus programs, the younger generation have become more internationalized. They identify themselves not as locals, not as this particular identity. So yes, everybody has a sub-identity as a nationalist identity, but it's no longer the priority of such identity. So their vision has been enlarged, and yeah, it's a slow process, but we're working on that.
And we talked earlier, we talked also about fear. And fear connected to identity, and in particular connected to losing of the identity. How do you see this?
Well, as an Asian, I am slowly losing some traditional identity of mine, but that actually doesn't have to do with anything with fear, because the fear is actually the lack of self-confidence or the lack of a sustainable circle of gratification, of validation. So if you are living in the modern world, you are individualistic and you are a strong person, being a stranger in a strange world, you're being adventurous, you're growth-minded, it doesn't really matter what kind of identity you have as your top priority. So you always adapt as you go. That is my identity, at least. But for the confused teenagers here, they're just going through a very difficult phase. We're transiting between traditional structurized society to a more atomized, deconstructed, individualistic world. So I think there's a problem that happens in the entire world in the postmodern age, not entirely European.
Okay, but how do you think, where does this fear come from? Fear from even middle-class people in France, in Germany, you know, having this anti-immigrant sentiments. How do you see it? Why is it happening so?
I think that is actually comes from the sense of restlessness or the anxiety that's caused by their so-called disturbed peaceful life. So they're not really a multicultural society to begin with. So I think the process of here in Europe actually begin to develop into a multicultural, multi-ethnic society. There has to be some kind of clash. There has to be some kind of a fear of the minority or the immigrants. So yes, there is, but it's beginning of the process. It's something people have to go through. And also this fear, from my opinion, is originated from the uneasiness and the clash between the traditional mindset and also their so-called imposed or their rationality that is supposed to be tolerant, supposed to avoid conflict, supposed to build a super ego, in their super ego to build a better world, but in their subconsciousness they'll have some traditional and conservative thoughts. So I think that's some inner struggle, some kind of inner struggle, and they're not consistent with themselves, they're not self-confident with this particular inner conflict. So that's the anxiety, that's the fear, I think.
Okay, thank you very much.